So I remember back when I was a lot younger and I was first getting onto self-improvement and first trying to better myself and rid myself of the addictions and sort of bad habits that I was constantly into, that I would have these sort of waves and bursts of trying to be useful, trying to be effective, but they would always like revert back to how I was before. So for example, I would go 5 days of going to the gym consistently, and then I snap back and I don't go for a few days, and then I like almost forget about it until I go again, go for like 3 days, and then I snap back. And I go for another few days and I snap back. And so my biggest issue has always just been consistency and sort of staying consistent. This also goes for back when I was a big binge eater. It's just sort of this idea that I would constantly go to things after a few days of not consuming or indulging in any of these pleasures. I would then go back to it and I would feel really bad about myself. And then it was when I felt bad about myself that I continuously dug deeper and deeper into these addictions and into this hole. So for that sake, we're going to talk about dopamine and the dopamine reward systems in this video, as I believe a true understanding of it is all you need to be able to actually be effective in your day-to-day life and to be able to conquer your mind, because once you can conquer your mind, you can conquer the world. And so that's what we're going to go over today. So first we're going to start off with the definition of dopamine. So dopamine is a chemical in the brain. I believe it's a neurotransmitter. And essentially what it does is it releases every time you are in the pursuit of something, whether that be a goal, water if you're really thirsty, food if you're really hungry, a partner, video games, substances, in any sort of pursuit in your life that makes you feel good or brain desires. Dopamine is released to make you want to pursue it. That's why that's sort of why it's this weird feeling, but like when you're working towards a goal, and that goal being like let's say doing good on a test, or like when you're working towards it, you'll feel this different level, and you're actually passionate about it. That's the thing. If you're actually passionate about it, you'll feel this level of gust, you'll feel this level of drive within you. But then once it's achieved, like you may think that like when you're pursuing it, you would think like, oh, this is gonna feel amazing. I'm gonna feel so good once I get the results I want. But when it happens, it doesn't feel as good. That's because dopamine is the chemical that's the chemical related to the pursuit of an activity, or sort of like a climax, I guess. And I think the chemical that's released is serotonin, or some type of opium, I'm not sure, or an opioid, I'm not sure what it is exactly, but essentially dopamine is what you get when you're chasing something, and I think serotonin is what you get when you actually get the thing. And so with that understanding, it's important to realize that dopamine comes from the pursuit of something. This is also important to realize that dopamine is different within different pursuits. For example, if you're eating pizza, you're gonna have a lot more dopamine than you would if you were just eating broccoli. That's because pizza is like a supernatural stimuli and broccoli is just broccoli. And so same thing can go for like video games. Video games, it's supernatural stimuli, flashing colors, big achievements, nice sounds, whatever. That's a supernatural stimuli. And then like reading a book is just reading a book. It's not as interesting. It could be interesting to you subjectively, but for your brain, video games are going to be a lot more interesting than reading a book. That's just how they're designed. They're meticulously designed to be more addicting, to entice the viewer, entice the user. The thing is, with these types of behaviors, your dopamine is spiked with these supernatural stimuli, with these extremely pleasurable activities and substances. And so when your dopamine is spiked, it has to eventually come back down in order for your body to maintain homeostasis. And so when it's spiked due to supernatural stimuli, it sinks back down, but it doesn't sink back down to the normal baseline that you were at previously. It will sink down lower than where you were at. And with that, you'll feel worse after you've already engaged in the supernatural stimuli. So basically, a basic way of understanding it is you do something that feels good now, you're going to feel bad later. And reversely, if you do something that feels bad now, you're going to feel a lot better later. That's just sort of the working of dopamine in your brain in order to maintain some sort of balance. If you're in the negatives and then in the positives, you come back, you'll be at your baseline. You're up in the positives and you're in the negatives, you'll be back to your baseline. And thing about a baseline is when you're constantly shooting up your dopamine with these supernatural stimuli, with video games, substances, junk food, whatever, your baseline is going to go down, 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 further and further. That's why you see people that when they get hooked onto something, all of a sudden nothing else in their life feels good. They only care about that one thing that they were desiring, or that seems really desirable to them, because nothing else feels the same. Nothing else gives them as much dopamine as that one activity or the few activities. And even at a certain point, they need to get more and more and more of that certain activity, or else it doesn't feel good. And they need to get more and more and more just to feel the same way that they would have felt if they did it for the first time. So that's sort of why it can feel like nothing feels good anymore. Why you may say, oh, video games just don't hit the same anymore, because you've been doing them so much for the past few years that of course they're not going to feel the same anymore. They're not going to feel as enjoyable as they once were. So the process of reversing this is a very simple process. All you need to do is just abstain from that supernatural stimuli, abstain from the video games, substances, junk food, whatever. You need to just abstain from that, and slowly, it takes about a month, slowly your baseline will rise again, because again your baseline goes up from spiking it so much. It goes down from spiking it so much, and so it'll take a few months for your baseline to go back up. And so that's sort of how you can bring your baseline back up. That's how you can make your life more enjoyable for everything in general, is you just abstain from the supernatural stimuli and it'll go back up. Of course, this takes into account if that you don't replace one bad habit with just another. Like, you're not just gonna quit eating junk food and then just like start playing video games for way more, or you're not gonna you can't replace one bad thing with another bad thing. That's not how it works. You would have to replace these high pleasure, like extremely pleasurable activities with other, seems like less a pleasurable activity, but they're actually just normal pleasurable activities. Are what you're supposed to be doing. Your body isn't made to be handling all this supernatural stimuli. So these other activities like reading, going outside, working out, all of these things are normal stimuli that you're supposed to be engaging in, not these like supernatural, artificial, man-made ones. And so with that, you need to replace the extremely pleasurable activities with the less pleasurable activities. Okay, so now that we've sort of gone over the mental workings of dopamine and how it can actually affect you in your day-to-day life, we're going to talk about what you can do to make the hard tasks, like the work that you may not want to do, working out, all of these tasks that may seem very daunting. We're going to talk about how you can make them more enjoyable, how I've been able to actually make them a lot more enjoyable, and sort of the practices, the actionable steps that you can take, and all these other factors that we can go over. So we're going to start off with dopamine stacking. That's what I like to call it. It's essentially where you stack multiple pleasurable activities together to try and get more out of it. However, this can be a huge setback for the main reason that you're making it so your brain requires multiple things at the same time for you to feel the enjoyment of just one thing. For example, this is a big one that I have a problem with. I'm slowly starting to cut out, is eating while watching something. I find this to be a huge issue because I feel like I need to be watching something while I eat, or listening to something while I eat, instead of just eating the food. And so with that, it's sort of like I lose 50-50 in both. I don't actually pay full attention to the video because I'm eating something, and I don't actually pay attention to the food because I'm watching something. And so I don't feel that much pleasure from the food. I don't feel that much pleasure from the video. It's really like a lose-lose. So with that, I needed to stop stacking these multiple activities together. I sort of needed to just be like, okay, I'm gonna eat. This is the dedicated time to eat now. And then I'm gonna watch this video after. This is the dedicated time for me to watch the video. I need to give it my full attention. I need to give it all of my energy. And so this can go for other things too. This can go for working out in the gym with music. Now, obviously, if you're not going to listen to your own music, you're going to have to listen to gym music, which is pretty bad. But that's the thing. You have to build, you can't create this reliance on having to listen to music and go to the gym at the same time, because eventually that's not going to be enough. You're going to need to listen to newer music that's louder. You'll need to add more stimulants when you go to the gym, like having to take another pre-workout. And then if you take pre-workout, you're eventually going to build a tolerance to it. You have to drink more and more and more. And so there's this practice that I've been implementing, which is essentially when you go to the gym, you take a coin before you go, right? You flip it. Heads, you'll listen to music. Tails, you won't listen to music. And so with that, you sort of spike your dopamine in a healthy way, which is that you can still enjoy listening to music when you work out, but you don't do it so frequently that you build a tolerance to it. You don't build an attachment to it. So that's a little habit. It was weird in the beginning, but like after some time, I realized like, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was. So, and with that, with the music, you can listen to less like stimulating music, I guess. You know, instead of listening to like the really loud, angry rap, you can sort of just listen to like, I know what I was listening to a while back was Hamza made this like tribal music video, or not music video, but like this tribal like music playlist. It kind of sounded like a mix between like pirate sea shanties and like just dark. I don't even know how to describe it. It was just like drums and like literal tribal music, and it wasn't as enjoyable as like, you know, my everyday playlist full of like songs that I usually listen to, but it sort of built this. It allowed me to sort of feel like, yo, this is mid. And then when I went back to my normal playlist after, the songs felt much more enjoyable. The gym felt much more enjoyable. I felt like I was having much more fun. I was bopping my head. I was singing in the gym. Like I felt much better about it. And so that's sort of the benefits of not dopamine stacking, is that you just make the activities much more enjoyable because you're not distracting away from them. You're much more present. You're much more involved. Again, this comes with meditation, mindfulness, is that you just become more present and mindful of the present moment. Also want to add on to this, the use of caffeine and other stimulants when working out. I found that coffee it's not, I don't know how to describe it, but it's like it makes the production of dopamine much more efficient and effective when doing something. That's why I'll always drink coffee before I record. That's why I usually just drink coffee like every morning before I work, because it allows more dopamine to be released and to be like absorbed into my brain before it just gets dispersed back into my body. And so that's why I found coffee is like an okay thing to do. The coffee, maybe some green tea, other like natural sources of caffeine. But like things like a energy drink, those types of caffeine, because they're extremely concentrated and they're very stimulating. They're, again, supernatural stimuli. Those, I can understand the benefit, and don't get me wrong, I'll take some, you know, time to time if I have to. If it's like a real crunch, if I had to study for something, like I will take them. But there's like a level, and there's a sort of limit to them. You can't be doing them all the time. You can't be doing them frequently. You have to be sort of spreading them out a bit more, as to make sure you don't build up that reliance, you don't build up that tolerance to where you need to drink more and more and more, up to the point where you're drinking like 3 cans just for one workout. So again, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but you get what I'm saying. Like you get that you need to not create a sort of reliance on these stimulants, on these high pleasurable activities. So the second sort of idea is that certain activities will feel bad now, but they'll feel much better later, and vice versa. Some activities will feel really good now, but they'll feel much worse later. That's sort of what I was talking about with the spiking of dopamine and then the falling of dopamine, is that activities such as cold showers, I hear have 2.5 times or boost your dopamine levels by 2.5, and they keep those levels heightened for hours, which basically means that you will secrete more dopamine after taking a cold shower for hours, which is why, you know, after you top out of a cold shower, it sucks to go in. Obviously, you know, no one wants to go in. I'm always standing there at the back of my shower. The water's coming here. It's right here. I'm just sitting here and I'm like, all right, like no one wants to do it. You wake up, you're tired, you miss the warmth of your bed, and now you have to go take a cold shower. It sucks. But when you hop out of the cold shower, after you take that hit, it's going to skyrocket, and it stays there too for a while, and then it tapers back to base level. That is a much better form, and that actually elevates your levels of or elevates your baseline, because when you sink down and you go back up, you need to think of it as going down and then up is going to raise your baseline, but going up and then down is going to lower it. Whatever you end off at, that's what happens to your baseline. So if you end off going down, your baseline goes down. if you end up going up, your baseline goes up. Sounds kind of weird, but just play that back a few times and it will be more understandable. And so with that, cold showers boosted by 2.5, and this is important because if you want to get work done, if you want to be productive, you need that boost of dopamine to make you want to pursue your goals even harder. Dopamine, again, like I said, is the pursuit chemical. It makes you want to pursue things. And so that's why boosting your dopamine through not supernatural stimuli like cold showers and coffee, those activities will boost your dopamine in a healthy way, as opposed to like video games or junk food or whatever, because again, those will spike it in the beginning, but then it will fall down after. This is nothing new to anyone on self-improvement. If you've been on self-improvement for a little bit, you understand the concept of delayed and instant gratification. Essentially, this is just confirming what we already know. Instant gratification bad, delayed gratification good. Now, the third one, there's certain like mental strategies for dopamine. There's this idea that talking about something enough will actually create more dopamine. For example, if I talked about this water bottle, if I had to if I was like a salesman and I had to convince someone to get this water bottle, then if I talked about it enough and I constantly was like, oh yeah, this water bottle is great, keeps my water really cold for a long time, fairly cheap, very light. Like if I talk about it enough, eventually my dopamine will spike just from looking at it, just from thinking about it or talking about it. And this can be applied to anything in life. If you have work to do, if you talk about it in a positive light, then your dopamine will be spiked. This is again sort of a talk about the power of your beliefs and the power of that your mind holds in the world. It's just that if you think about something in a good way, it's just gonna be good for you. If you think about something in a bad way, it's gonna be bad for you. It's nothing new. It's always why you hear people say, think positive thoughts, say positive things. Don't think about it like that, because when you do think about something in a bad way, your dopamine is going to sink. You're going to feel bad about it. But when you think about something in a good way, it's going to rise. This is the same way that when you hear someone say something that you already believe or affirm a belief that you already had, your dopamine goes up. And that's this is a bit of a tangent, but like that's why social media companies and these social media programs have been so effective, because the algorithms within them, they perpetuate or they continue this thought process that the user already had. So if the user already believed one thing, the algorithm will find out what that thing is and it'll keep showing it again and again and again and again to the user until the user is like always on that app scrolling, because they're seeing things that reaffirm their beliefs, and that secretes much more dopamine. And so that's why social media apps have been so successful. Social media apps have been so powerful, is that their platforms perpetuate beliefs that the user themselves agree with. I want to go to another point. It's the last point, is that you can spike your dopamine simply from like effort. So what that means is before an activity, you may not feel good about it, and after an activity, you may feel exhausted from it. But the way to sort of think about dopamine from doing a hard thing, like let's say you have a competition coming up, right? You're feeling kind of like, I don't know, it's like you're feeling kind of bummed out from before, or you're feeling kind of tired from beforehand, and then after you're also exhausted. And so what you don't want to do, I don't know where I'm going with that, I'm probably gonna cut that part out, but let's say you have a competition and you don't want to spike your dopamine before that competition, and you don't want to spike it afterwards, because that's going to make the actual effort being the competition much more harder and much less enjoyable. And so what you want to do is you want to spike your dopamine in the midst of that effort. You want to sort of talk to yourself, have this idea where you speak it into existence, which is that I'm getting dopamine from this effort. I enjoy doing the work. I enjoy working hard. You need to say those things to yourself in order for you to sort of feel good from doing the work, not beforehand when you like take all the pre-workout, take all the stimulants to make you actually do the work, and you don't want to do it afterwards where you're done with everything, you're tired, so you're just going to watch TV, you're just going to eat whatever you want. You don't want to do that. You want to spike it in the middle so you feel good when you're doing the work. That's when you feel the best, because when you're doing the work, that's what you should be doing. And so if you can make doing the work feel good, then you win. Then you'll always want to do work. You'll feel best when you're doing the work, so you'll do it more. And whatever that work may be, you'll get more out of it. And so sort of the idea for this section, I know it was kind of hard to understand, but essentially, don't spike your dopamine before you do something. That's something being a task. Maybe you have to do work, maybe you have competition, maybe you have to do some homework or whatever it is. You don't want to spike it beforehand, and you don't want to spike it after. You want to spike it in the middle by saying that you enjoy doing it, that you are deriving dopamine, or you're secreting dopamine from just simply doing the work. That's how you'll make your work more effective. That's how you'll enjoy it more. And sort of that's how you'll be able to essentially just conquer whatever you want to conquer. So that's been it for today's video. Bit of a long one, kind of a lot of information. Watch it again if you have to. Hope you found value in this video. Make sure you share it with someone, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.